Hello everybody, this is Skyflight44, aka Zact44, and today I'm going to be actually continuing Pokemon Stadium. What a shocker. And actually this is going to continue to be post-commentary for now. I just didn't want to start up a Pokemon Silver playthrough and then just immediately go on a rant about Pokemon. But I felt it would be justified having Pokemon Stadium video and then just going rant on Pokemon. Because I kind of have... It's been bugging me for quite a few years. Just how I still enjoy Pokemon, but it's almost like I really can't say the quality is decreasing because the multiplayer quality, though that's not really my thing, has absolutely gotten much better in my opinion, but the single player just seems to get a bit more boring. Now, not with each game. That never again will it ever get to the point where it's Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. That it's still not so bad once you actually play it, but never do I feel like, hey, let's go play Pokemon Diamond, let's go play Pokemon Pearl. I haven't even beaten Pokemon Pearl, to be honest. Maybe once. I definitely know I haven't beaten Pokemon Platinum yet. But, it's really... To be honest, one of the big things about Pokemon Diamond and Pokemon Pearl is I found out about it from a site like 8-10 days before it actually came out. It might have been 7 days before it came out in Japan. So, as you could probably expect, I wanted a DS almost immediately after. I actually did get the DS. But the initial game I had on it, the game I kind of wanted to get a DS for to begin with, you know, I knew there was going to be a Pokemon game on it, but I wanted Final Fantasy III. Final Fantasy III was the first game I ever seen on the DS. It was my sister brought it over, my half-sister, and basically it was one of the first times I actually seen a not 3Ds, a regular DS in my hands. It was a DS Lite, and I just played a little bit of the beginning of Final Fantasy III, and I was like, being kind of raised on the Game Boy Advance, not really being up to date with a lot of gaming and technology, seeing 3D in the palm of my hands, it was just great. I really didn't play the Final Fantasy series too much. I didn't really have all that much experience with it. Getting into FF3, trying out, falling in love with the job class system, really kind of started me off on the DS fairly well. Kind of like how Pokemon did for the Game Boy Advance, for the Game Boy Color. Every single time I got a handheld system, I always got a good RPG in the very beginning. But when it came to Pokemon Diamond, which I got the day it came out, like played it for 10 hours the day it came out. Well, maybe not 10 hours, at least until I could have gotten Empoleon. But I really didn't. The spark was still there. This was before I actually lost this spark for Pokemon, but it was probably due to my incredibly high expectations with just how much fun I had with Generation 2, Generation 1, and especially Generation 3. Some people don't like Generation 3. I'm a huge fan of Generation 3. Granted, I probably played Generation 3 just as much as 2, so I can't grab Generation 3 anymore because I have to beat like half the game before I'm actually hooked on it. but I played the beginning half so many times. But Pokemon Diamond just didn't have that spark. The Generation 3 had all these different climates come together. You went into a desert. You went into a freaking volcano. You were battling on top of a volcano. You went and traveled the sea. You actually went into all these nice places. All these different climates that were pretty cool. For the actual Game Boy Advance, I really, really enjoyed the graphics and everything. But that really I didn't have that same feeling when it came to Pokemon Diamond. Yeah, sure, there was a swamp, there was a forest, of course there was going to be some kind of forest. And there was a lot of mountain. Granted, some people that wouldn't be so bad, but to be honest, a lot of people that didn't like Generation 3 didn't like actually having to go and surf around places. But all they really did in Generation 4 was get rid of the actual water, which was one of the things I liked about Generation 3, and replaced it with caves and mountains, where you would have to use rock climb, strength, flash, and possibly surf within the actual mountain. There were just things. Actually, also Rock Smash. A lot of people that didn't like Cut, definitely Rock Smash was a goddamn new Cut. Which, until like Generation 5, I didn't care about that. But it was kind of, just the environments were kind of boring. Not to mention the actual Pokemon in Gen 4 was actually quite bland. Not to mention, while they did try to go and update some of the older generations Pokemon, such as Magmar, Electabuzz, and just quite a lot of them. Even actually going, if they didn't get a new evolution, some of them actually got a baby Pokemon, such as Mr. Mime got Mime Jr., Bonsly for Sudowoodo, and just stuff like that. Actually, one of the big things I didn't like about that generation, Generation 4, was the fact that almost half of the Pokemon from Generation 4, you weren't even able to get it originally when you actually played the game. You pretty much, out of 150 Pokemon, they just didn't have enough Pokemon in it. You would think if they actually added another 106 Pokemon that most of them would have actually been in the main game, but because a lot of them, like Magmar or something, Electivire, a lot of those Pokemon that are just new additions to old evolutionary lines, kinda just were left out. And then they had to add in, all of our favorites. Geodude, Zubat, and in this generation, for some reason, Machop got pretty big. And why did we have those? One of the reasons why Generation 5 was so great was that everything, while a lot of them felt like other Pokemon that we've seen before, for the most part, everything was new. But in Generation 4, we just had so much. There really wasn't anything that felt like an adventure in Generation 4. A lot of Pokemon we've seen before. Most of the areas felt exactly like, didn't feel exactly, but just felt bland. There really wasn't. Team Galactic, in my opinion, until I read the, Pokemon Special manga, didn't really actually feel all that threatening. They I don't know, it just didn't feel all that. Actually, now that I think about it, saying that they don't feel threatening, when the guy actually wants to go and, you know, recreate the universe or whatever, I think that was something like it, and they use bombs and shit, you think they would, that would be pretty threatening, but they just looked like a joke. Every Generation 3 felt so much like an adventure. All the different climates, seeing these, enemy grunts run pretty much everywhere. But that was the big thing about Generation 2. You've seen Team Rocket with the Slowpoke Well and Mahogany Town, and in Goldenrod right after. Where else do you see him? One grunt in Cerulean, or next to it on the Nugget Bridge. But Nugget Bridge, which is no longer the Nugget Bridge in that game, I believe. It just sucks. Generation 4 just kind of didn't feel like what Generation 3 did. You're just seeing all these new Pokemon in Generation 3. Generation 3, for the most part, had a lot of, kind of filled the very beginning of the game with a lot of new Pokemon. Yeah, we did see some Pokemon we actually had before, like Goldeen, Tentacool, early on. But for the most part, we really didn't get into a lot of the earlier Pokemon to maybe past Slateport. Which then we would actually go and find Oddish. We would go and just start finding Pokemon like Meryl and everything. Then we kind of seen a lot of the Pokemon we've seen before. But in the 4th generation, we don't even get to the first gym and we're starting to see Pokemon we've seen before. That's just kind of a waste. Not to mention the music, it's just, I've never really cared too much for any of the music in the 4th generation. But the game is a good game. The 4th generation's a good game. It was just a bad Pokemon game. Or, I can't really say a bad Pokemon game. The worst Pokemon game. The feeling of an adventure, the excitement that's supposed to be in a Pokemon game was just gone. And I believe after going into Generation 4, because Generation 4 was like the point where my little brother said he didn't feel like playing Pokemon anymore. And it was basically around the time that like Gen 5 was about to come out. I remember going and getting myself a Soul Silver. Even going back to Soul Silver, yeah, it was so much better than Gen 4. But even then, there were just things that I couldn't get myself around. To be honest, it was the speed. Gen 5, in my opinion, didn't really have all that big of a, like it wasn't all that slow. Generation 3, getting into a battle was quite slow, but everything in the battle, the animations, your health dropping, the experience go up, were quite quick. The 2nd generation was pretty quick in its and just Pokemon battles, but Gen 4 felt as if everything was slowed down. It kind of carried over, in my opinion, to Soul Silver and Heart Gold, which is which is pretty much the reason why I've only pretty much beaten it once. But I'm so glad that the 5th generation came out. Everything, once again, felt like an adventure. A lot of the places were new. Completely new Pokemon. Not to mention when Black 2 and White 2 came out, they used all of the Pokemon basically in the 5th generation. And they also added a shitload of other Pokemon, bringing the Pokedex up to like 300. Not to mention the great story in Black and White, which a lot of people consider a great story. But to be honest, I've been reading Pokemon Special long before I got into, Black and White came out. So while the story is good for Pokemon games, it's the quality of story just fails when it compared to Pokemon Special. But granted, I still want to see my way through the entirety of that. I believe it's only scanlated to for the most part the end of Soul Silver and Heart Gold right now. But I would very much like to get through that. But getting back on the track, the 5th generation just did so much better than the 4th generation. And that it once again kind of felt like an adventure. We went into these new areas that had different climates. One of the big parts, in my opinion, was going into that desert, because that was definitely not something we actually got in the 4th generation, in the main game at least. I don't really remember that extra little place, but not just that coming out of that huge city, it just felt so much better than the 4th generation. That it felt new. Looking at all these different Pokemon, these new type combinations, it felt new. And while it did have its bad points, in my opinion, mainly in the XP system, and the fact that after you go into every single new area, and it seems like the enemies, just your opponent's Pokemon, goes up a couple of levels, and that's after every single route, going from one route to the next before a city. And in the second route, they jump up like 2-3 levels. In the old generations, if there was 2 routes before an actual city, yeah, sure, the levels would go up, but it would be after quite a lot of actual Pokemon that you would actually face in those trainers. You would pretty much level up with them. But in the 5th generation, I don't really necessarily think this happened too much in the 4th generation, but one of the biggest things about the 5th generation was the fact that a lot of people had one Pokemon to themselves. A lot, if not one, maybe 2, at most 3. If your opponent had 3, you're almost sure to go into a triple battle. But what happened to these Pokemon trainers in the older generations that had 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5 or 6 Pokemon? A trainer having 5 or 6 Pokemon, even 4. 4 is rare in the 5th generation. Well, at least the main game for Black and White, which I'm really riffing off of. But 5 and 6? Like hell, you were gonna find that. And even with the gym leads, I mean, a lot of these problems you could see in the older generations. But in like Pokemon Silver, a lot of the trainers actually had 2 or 3 Pokemon at least. Even then, you could still find a lot of just Pokemon trainers with 3, even sometimes 4 every now and then. Like even going into Goldenrod, there's a girl with the 2 Hoppips and a Bulbasaur. There's the guy with the Spearow, I believe, or a Tata, maybe another Spearow, and a Sandshrew. Then there's a guy with a Mankey and an actual, well, Diglett. And then there's a guy with a Snubbull. All of these parties varied, not just in their Pokemon, but in how many Pokemon they actually had. Yeah, sure, one guy has a Psyduck, but then another guy has, like 4 Magnemites, was it 3 in a Voltorb, and another one has 4 Voltorbs. That just felt so much better than, for the most part, every single Pokemon trainer having like 1 or 2 Pokemon. When that happens, it's really not all that difficult to actually go and beat your opponent. At the same time, you're not really getting enough experience to actually keep up your levels with your opponent's levels with how quickly they actually go up. And that kind of led to me level grinding a lot in the 2 games. Which, I mean, I personally level grind even when I don't need to. Excessively, especially in the 3rd generation. And that's just optional. But in the 5th generation, it felt mandatory. I actually level grinded before the Elite Four. I was gonna do that because I didn't know anything about them, and I was trying to make sure I had a few levels over them at least, so I could I just could, well, not plow through them, but do fairly well. And I got tired of level grinding. I just stopped playing the game, and I just never beat it. Granted, I beat Black 2 and White 2, but then again, you get a lucky egg in that one. But over the things, the 4th generation I beat like 7 times. About 6 on Diamond, and about 1 on Pearl. Or maybe 7 on Diamond and none on Pearl. But for a main series Pokemon game, for me not to actually go and beat it at least once is kind of, especially with how much people love that game, it's kind of bad. I really can't think of a word to really explain it. The game, a lot of people love Black 2 and White 2 so much better. Except for maybe the story. But what? I didn't beat the game. And I don't really feel like going back and actually beating it. I don't even have the game anymore. I still have Black 2. But then again, I beat Black 2. Black 2 was so much fun. There were a lot of stuff that was wrong with it. One of the big things I'm thinking of is after you beat the game, there are some people with Pokemon they probably shouldn't have that are under-evolved, and I'm gonna be going back to the most blatant example about the priest girl that has like a level 57 or 58, Dratini, Gibble, and Bagon, and what she could have had a level 58 Dragonite, Salamence, and a fucking Garchomp. And this was a preschooler girl. A lot of people come up with that example, and I'm not all that observant when I play a game the first time. I'm just kind of I just kind of blend in with the actual game and just go with the flow. And even that did not fly by me. Even then, after you already beaten the game, people still were going and using like 3 Pokemon. Granted, again, that's not all that bad. I much prefer that over the 1 Pokemon a lot of people had, but I'm expecting like 4 Pokemon at least. One of the reasons why I think that generation was quite easy was the fact that my opponents really didn't have all that many Pokemon. I had 6. Yeah, sure, you can beat one of mine. I have 5 others. Well, not to mention that money was quite in abundance, and because of that, first time in the entire series, I actually had a shitload of Moo Milks, Super Potions, and everything I ever needed for healing. Which is something I actually quite enjoyed. I mean, even though again, I did have to go through a lot of level grinding to keep up with my opponents, because it takes a lot more to get your levels up 2 or 4 levels. Your Pokemon up 2 or 4 levels, 6 of them, than just getting your opponent up 2 or 4 levels, especially when they're sending you 1 Pokemon. Granted, the experience generally favored you if you didn't over-level, but you weren't giving many opportunities to get it, which I'm trying to get at. And that just... no. It kind of... It was trying to get you to use items, which I do like. I never felt the need to go out in a Pokemon game and go and buy healing items to use regularly, unless I'm doing a challenge run, which, except for the Elite Four and Champion, that's pretty much the only time I ever feel like going out and buying full restores, max potions, and all the like. And then we come to the 6th generation. The 4th generation kind of made me sad after a while. I was really hyped up for it, really enjoyed it in the very beginning, but the more I played it, the more I just felt it didn't live up to my expectations. The 5th generation looked promising, but I didn't necessarily come into it all that hyped up, considering the 4th generation was kind of making me not really care too much about the Pokemon series to begin with. But with Black 2 and White 2 brought me back into the series permanently. X and Y seemed incredibly promising. I bought the 3DS for X and Y. And when I originally played it, I might have a little bit overreacted. Is it my favorite Pokemon game? Probably Pokemon Silver still beats it. Is it close? Actually, still kinda yes. A lot of people thought that the story and stuff was not as good when it came to the 6th generation, but I quite enjoyed a lot of the dialogue in the actual game. Well, considering that you don't talk, it was more like monologues, but a lot of the trainers had some funny one-liners, mainly in the Hex Girls, which a lot of them were quite humorous. Like the first one especially, when you seen her in that swamp area, was just like, you knew that there were some funny moments in the game after this. You knew that they were quite quirky, but There were a lot of things about the 6th generation that I liked. Black 2 and White 2, one of the great things about it was the fact that they threw Pokemon at you. It was kind of like Generation 2 in that regard. They threw, in the very beginning, a lot of different evolutionary lines that you could actually use. Then I played Generation 6, and one of the biggest things about it was they didn't just throw 1 or 3 evolutionary lines. Before you even got to the first real city, they threw like 14 different evolutionary lines at you. If possible, 14. And let's go back to what I was saying about Generation 3 and being an adventure. And that Generation 5 was much better an adventure than 4. Here's the thing. The 6th generation felt like an adventure for a completely different reason. It was more like 5, in which you had your little companions that would go through the game with you. A lot of people, some of the complaints about it was that they didn't like the other kids that were around you. In my opinion, I kind of liked all those kids. Mainly because, first of all, it's actually kind of nice seeing the protagonist actually have friends more than one friend, especially considering that the Pokemon anime, Ash gets like a best friend every single episode. It's kind of interesting seeing the actual protagonist have a couple of friends. I mean, you're thrown out into the real world, into a brutal world where Pokemon fight each other all the time, in which you would probably be screwed if you didn't have Pokemon. It's kind of nice seeing that the protagonist is still a kid. You can control a freaking Pokemon god, but you don't have any friends? Oh, sorry, Generation 4. Yeah, little bastard Barry definitely wasn't a friend. Little twat. But, I actually going through the game, you're just meeting up with these, meeting up with the protagonist, new friends, battling them, just going through the story, actually them following you, having quite a few battles with them, also having quite a few times where you battled alongside them, was just really interesting. Not to mention with the tons and tons of freaking Pokemon evolutionary lines that they threw at you. There were 3 Pokedexes in the game, and it's like, what was it, 456, 455? The Pokedex? How many different Pokedex entries you can get in the game? I tried catching as many as I could, and holy shit. There were so many. I eventually stopped because I had over 100 different Pokemon in the computer. I really, one of the best things about the show, one of the best things about Black 2 and White 2 was the fact that with all the Pokemon that you actually had, you could actually go out, start a new game, pick completely different Pokemon, then play the game immediately and have a completely different set of Pokemon. Doing that in Generation 4 was quite hard, but doing that in Pokemon X was... you could go and do that so many different times. Granted, you either need to go and shut off the XP share, or do what I did, which was probably the other, a completely different way. But go and get like a shitload of Pokemon so that you're just switching up teams to actually get rid of that over-leveled problem that the XP share did to you. But Generation 6, when it comes to replayability, and the single player is quite high. It's not all that there's really not much to do after you beat the game, but the story is good in my opinion. I really like that. I really like that really tall guy. I forgot his name. I haven't played the game in quite a bit. But the amount of Pokemon you could actually use in the game, just seeing the protagonist have a more normal life, and just all the funny little lines that the NPCs have. The game actually brought me back into the series for good, just like Black 2 and White 2 did. I myself didn't truly get out of the Pokemon series with the 4th generation. But even now, the 4th generation completely changed everything. I mean, how many of you actually played the 4th generation and just start to think, I've been playing these games for so long. What? I've played this game like 2 generations ago. The same game. Why do I continue to play it? It's just getting boring, sort of thing. That's kind of what I felt with. That's kind of what I felt with Generation 4, and even going into Generation 5. It really felt as if because the gameplay really doesn't change all too much. Except with Fairy Pokemon, that was a real game changer to me and made it a lot of fun. But the games just got boring, which is very, very strange. Just go in the comments and tell me what you think. See you, everybody.